Residential schools and the affected. Residential schools were first created in New France, also known as Quebec, in 1880. They were created by the Canadian government and Christian churches to try and educate and shape the First Nation youth to try and become citizens of the new country. In the residential schools, the children didn't have anyone to love and their culture and leading them to a mixed way of life. As parents, they didn't know any better, so they also ended up beating their children, as they experienced. Lots of communities turned to alcohol and drugs to try and forget the past that they've had at these schools. They also have the highest suicide rate of any culture in Canada at a staggering 40%. The poem I picked is Monster by Dennis Saddleman. It's about his time and experiences at one of these residential schools. About the poem. During the entire poem, Dennis clearly shows disgust for the residential schools, quoting, "I hate you, residential school, I hate you," a total of 6 times in the poem. I think the way he spoke about the schools in the poem is the comparison of that of a sunflower seed. The quote, "Your wide mouth took me, your yellow stained teeth chewed the Indian out of me." It's like the sunflower seed in the sense that you put it in your mouth, take the flavor and the seed in the middle, and then you spit it all out. The quote, "Your stomach growled at me every time I broke school rules." I like this quote because he's trying to fight against the school system and keep his cultural identity together. About Dennis Saddleman. Dennis is from the area known as Nikolai Valley. He's a residential school survivor from Kamloops, and he's a widely known poet who writes about his times in these residential schools. The artist I chose is Kent Mockman, about Kent Mockman. Kent was raised in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and is a First Nation artist of Cree ancestry. He currently lives and works in his home in Toronto, Canada. In his art pieces, he targets both Native American and Euro-American communities that have been affected by colonialism. His work has appeared in art exhibits in North America and Europe. Before his art, he was a backdrop and costume designer at a performing arts theater and company. Conclusion. Residential schools in Canada had a profound and lasting effect on Indigenous communities. They forced assimilation, cultural suppression, and abuse experienced by Indigenous children in these institutions resulted in years of trauma that will be experienced by future generations, loss of cultural identity, and systemic challenges such as higher rates of mental health issues and substance abuse. Although the idea of teaching Indigenous kids at school was a good idea, the execution was done terribly and will forever haunt Canada's past.